Hello, this is Mistress Dairine, also known as Gael Stirler, and I'm going to teach you how to do a painting from the Manesse Codex. The University of Heidelberg has a wonderful manuscript that is commonly referred to as the Manesse Codex or the Heidelberg Codex, and it can be found at this address right here. We're using page number 35. Actually, it's page 20R, but the shelf number or the digital number is 0035. And here's our picture, now which I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and you'll get an idea of what we're going to be doing. First thing that I did was I printed this out as a color photocopy, which is right here, and I'll be using that to reference rather than looking at the computer screen. Then I printed it out in black and white, and I trimmed that down a little bit to fit my paper. I've also reproduced this at the size that I'm going to use it. The back of the paper I've covered with graphite. What I did was I took graphite that you buy at the hardware store. It's usually used for taking care of squeaky doors and gates. And I just put a little bit of that on my paper. And then I used this dowel that is covered with a powder puff, and then I put linen over the top of that. You can use just plain old powders, cotton balls or something like that to get it soft at the end of the stick. And then you just rub it in. You don't have to put very much of the graphite on here to spread it out all over the back and create your own carbon paper. Then just blow it off a little bit so it's not going to get all over everything. Put it into place on your Pergamenata, and tape it down so that it doesn't move around. Just tape it on two sides. I also have taped down the paper that I'm going to be tracing onto, so it's nice and stiff. Okay, now I'm taking a blue pen so that I can see where I've marked my lines. And I'm going to draw over all of the lines on the paper. And you can also use a ruler to make sure that you set these lines up nice and straight. Draw those straight lines as long as you can before you have to lift your hand. Don't do like little bitty strokes like this. Draw as long as you can. Over here on the shield, I'm going to try and keep that a nice smooth curve. Now, when I get to drawing the figure, I don't need to draw every single line in because I'm going to be referring back to the picture. So I'm just drawing the outline of the hair. And I'm not even going to draw his face in. I'm going to draw his chin. But I'm not going to draw his face in. I'll get that later. First of all, we need to get the outline of everything before going in and trying to get all the details. If I don't understand what something is that I'm tracing, I can look back at my color picture in order to get a better idea of what I'm looking at. One thing I don't like is the shape of his foot here. It looks like his ankle is broken, so I'm going to move his foot over a little bit and draw it like that. Now I have to start drawing in the interior part of his body. So I want to get these arms, his hands, now the reason I use the blue pen is so that I can see where I've already drawn. And I'm going to draw in some of these lines of the wrinkles and folds, all the draping of his clothing. I'm not worried about which colors go where yet, because that's not important. All right. Okay, I need to get this foot in here. And I think I've got everything in the figurine. Now I'm going to draw his scroll. Now when this award is given out, we can put Queen's Grace on here, Azure Archer, Light of Atenvelt, whatever it is that is being given out. I could use this area right here to put the arms of the Queen if it's a Queen's Grace, the individual's arms if this is an award of arms. I can put the medallion of the order, like the Black Phaeon or the Azure Archer or the Light of Atenvelt in this area. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. Let's take a look and see what we've got so far. I just need to get the rest of the border drawn around it, and it looks pretty good. Okay, let's see, anything else missing? Okay, his blanket right here. And that's about it. Okay, so now I can take this off and set that aside. And here's my drawing. Welcome to part 2. Right now I'm finishing up the border. I'm painting it in blue, golden yellow, and a scarlet red. I use these colors because those are the colors that are in the original. The gold color will be later covered with some gold metallic paint. And the paints that I am using are pan paints by Talus. They're gouache that has been put into these shell shapes, and they go into a paint box just like this. This is a professional paint box. The cost on it is roughly the same as what you would spend on a set of Winsor & Newton. And I like this brand because you can pull them out and hold them in your hand, and it makes it really easy to work. You can also clean them off if you need to, but the point being not to mix your colors on on the little pans, but instead to put them onto a palette. And what I'm using for a palette here is a sushi dish that I got at Pier 1 Imports, and it is a great place to mix colors and you get just the shade that you want. In the case of the orangey red color, I had to add a little bit of yellow to get exactly the shade that I wanted. And I didn't outline everything in ink first, though sometimes I do it that way on this one, because if you look at the original, it doesn't appear that they did it that way, that instead the outlining was added at the end, if there is any outlining to be done. Now I gotta touch up that one little spot that I smeared here. Later on I'll go back with a X-Acto knife and get rid of the excess. But if you look at the original, there's all kinds of smears and the edges are blurry. So let's see if we can get that in focus a little better. Well, not really. Okay, but you get the idea that there isn't any outlining. Another thing is that on some of the pages in the Manesse Codex, you can see where the artist changed his mind about where to put certain colors, or I mean, they did a drawing and then they decided, oh, I'm going to change the shape of that, or I'm going to make this person taller or shorter, or I would change the position of the hand, and they just left the pencil lines. Okay, now I'm going to outline the scroll. As you can see on the original, it was outlined in red. So let's do that. I'm going to use a different brush here. Okay. I just switched to a brush that's called a liner brush. It's got a very long, thin hairs on it that are just wonderful because they hold a lot of paint and you can make long, thin lines with it. I try to make that line as long as I can before lifting my finger. Otherwise you get these little hairy lines that don't look very professional. There we go. When you use a brush instead of a pen to do your outlining, you get a much more vibrant line. It has more character, as you can see. Now there's a leaf at the end of his throne right here. So I'm going to just freehand that leaf. I'm switching to a little bit bigger brush to work on the leaf because I found that a little bit difficult with such a small brush. And I've got another leaf over here. There's my leaves. All done. The brush that I'm using is a Royal Soft Grip size 4. A lot of you might be amazed to find out that I'm using a size 4 for so much. I try to use the largest brush for any particular job. The larger the brush, the faster you're going to paint. So if you're just out there using those itty-bitty brushes, you're slowing yourself down. The Manesse Codex was also known as the Menacingers book. It's a whole bunch of stories about knights, and they're like poems. Many of them are jokes. They're silly stories, anecdotes about these knights of Germany and the common people singers, not the major singers, not like the opera singers, but the Menacingers would go around and they would sing these songs about the lords of Germany, and they were amusing tales. So they all got put into a book and illustrated. The illustrations were actually done about 100 years after the stories were written. And in this particular codex, it was painted in the 13th century. So we have an idea of what the clothing was like in the late 1200s. There we go. Now let's get the blue color, and we'll do the bottom part of the throne. And we're all pretty familiar with the pictures because they've been reproduced so many times. But one thing I found is that most people think that everything is outlined in it. And unless you actually pull it out and look at it really close, you'd be surprised. It's not. Okay, now what I'm going to do is start laying in the color on his clothing. And for that, I'm going to use an even bigger brush. This brush here is a number 9 brush. And since he's got green on, I've mixed up a green where I've mixed yellow and blue together. And that's what I'm going to be using. And at first, I'm going to put the colors in lightly, and then I'm going to get darker. I want to get a little bit of the shading done. And notice how his cuff is in gold, so I'm going to stop there. And I'm referring constantly back to my the picture right here that I printed out, so that I know where the folds and the different shades of green are going to go. And I start shading right away when I'm painting. No need to waste any time over it. I just don't have to do really dark shading at first, but I want to get an idea of where those darker shades go. That's why when I mix up my paint on my palette over here, I want you to see this. I've got some darker green and some lighter green, and I can put my brush into any part of that green and use it as I am painting. So I'm always making those decisions on where the darkness goes. I don't have to spend a whole lot of time worrying about it. Okay, now for this, got to be careful because this part right here is the underside of his cloak, and it's made out of fur instead of green cloth. So let's avoid that. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit of the darker green. And just start to define where the dark colors go. I don't actually have to do all of the shading. I just want to get an idea of where the darker colors go while it's still nice and wet. Well, you don't want it too wet because this is Pergamenata, and it does not like very wet paint. The red's a little bit trickier. You can mix up a different shade of red here, and what I am using is a rose madder instead of just putting in some white into my red, because if I do that I'm going to get a really, Barbie pink. So instead I'm using rose madder or Indian let's see, what is it called? Indian red light. That's another good choice. In fact, I think this is Indian red light. Indian red light does not turn into pink. I mean, it's a shade of pink, but it's not that, Barbie pink, So, I added just a little bit of red to it and a little bit of white. And that's laid in pretty good. Now I'm mixing up a little bit of red and a little bit of green over here on my palette. There's green. And get some red. And I do that until I get a dark, dark red color. That will be the color I use for my shadows. You might be wondering why I used green for my the color to darken the red instead of, say, brown or something else. I like to use the opposites to make a shade. Then you get a color that is closer to what they used in period, more accurate, as you'll see in a few minutes. I constantly refer back to this picture and the one up on the screen so that I know that what I'm painting is looking as much like the original as I can get it. If you don't have something to refer to, it makes it extremely difficult to get the right look. And I'm afraid that a lot of you are painting on the fly without any guide to go by and getting frustrated. Well, if you can get the original artwork, you're going to find it so much easier. Now, don't be surprised if you can't paint this fast. This is the second time in 2 days that I've painted this picture, so I have a little bit of experience with it and with painting pictures from this codex. but you'll find that it actually looks more historically accurate if you paint fast, because it was originally painted fast. And to get that freedom of line, that abandon of brushwork, you need to paint in the same brisk manner that it was done originally. And it might take a few tries. It's like the ancient Japanese calligrapher who painted a picture of a horse in like 5 minutes, and was asked how long it took him. He said, 5 minutes and a lifetime. Okay, now I have all of my basic lines painted in the darker color. I'm going to go in and put my highlights, and then I will put my accents. Accents are the darkest colors, the darkest shadows. They should be used sparingly, just like highlights should be used sparingly. Okay, now I have some white, and I'm mixing it in with the pink to get a small amount of a very light pink color. That's going to highlight the tops of all these folds. And I'm just about done with those highlights. Okay, now we're back, and I have been working on the green area. I've added all of this shading in here, and after I put my highlights on, I put a little wash of yellow over them to give it a more golden tone. I also went in here on the pink area, and I added my accents. This line right here I darkened quite a bit. I brought this in here, darkened it, I darkened it right here in order to make those folds look like they're really in shadow, and that made the whole thing pop quite a bit. I also added a black line right along the edge to make my white bit of trim on the edge a little more obvious. And now we're ready to work on the face and hands and hair. You can see I've already laid in a basic flesh tone and put a light brown on the hair. So I'm mixing up a darker brown with a size 4 brush. Let's see. Now this is a size 0. I'm sorry. It's a size 0. That's 0. And I'm going to put all of the little curlies in his hair. I'm working real small here. I start with the bottom ones because I'm going to overlap. See, like this. He's got all these little curls in his hair. Notice how he has sort of a red crown. I should say that he's got a golden crown that is outlined in red. So I'm going to do the outlining. It's a series of circles. I wish I could get that a lot more in focus. This camera is made to focus on faces, and without a face, it can't focus. Okay, now we're ready to start putting a face on him. Now, the first thing I notice is his cheeks are nice and rosy. So I'm going to add some color to his cheeks. Actually, I'm starting out with a kind of a brown tone to define where his cheeks go. And then there's a line on his throat. And here's his eyelids. And side of his nose. I'm going to get a little bit more red and put the rosiness into his cheeks. Oops, a little too much. So I cleaned off my brush and I'm working the rosy color into his cheeks. His lips, got like his lower lip is red, and right in the middle of his lips there's a little bit of red. His nose on the right side is defined in red. A little bit more red on his cheek, and we're just about ready to go. Okay, now I'm ready to start putting the definition into his face with a dark color. Let's see, I don't think I can get it to focus in any better than that. I'm putting some white. One thing I don't like is I got it a little too close to the edge of his nose, so I'm kind of wiping that out there. And now I'm going to go for the black. Putting in his eyebrows and the center of his eye, his iris, his pupil, and I am drawing the line to the center of his mouth. Blending them around, and I think we got a face on there that I can live with. It's not exactly like the one in the picture, but it's pretty close, and I'm happy with it. So now I'm going to focus in on the fingers. I want to outline the hands. It's almost like doing cartoon hands. They're really quite graceful. There we go. And we've got a little bit of red here around the yellow. Now I'm going to take my white and put some buttons on his gown. I'm using the liner again. This is a 10-aught liner. I can get really small with it. And I'm going to put my little white line around the hem on his green. With that, it's all done.